Good morning, everyone. My name is Darlene, and welcome back to the Service and Support track. Before we get started, just some general housekeeping things. Please make sure that your cell phones are set to silent or to vibrate just to not interrupt the session. Secondly, if you haven't already, be sure to download the Summit app. I'm sure you all have by now. And if you haven't been doing so, be sure to rate all the sessions that you've attended so that you can let our speakers know how they did for you. We have a jam-packed afternoon of talks with another strong lineup like we had yesterday. Topics will include today how you can extend your service desk with apps, how VMware migrated their private cloud to Atlassian, and how to do agile ITSM. So our first breakout of the day expands on the concept of open work as it focuses on team integration and standardizing Jira Service Desk in a decentralized environment. Chief IT Architect at the University of Rochester, Kevin, will outline and demo how to efficiently scale IT service management, how to integrate multiple service desks, and the importance of building an all-encompassing service catalog. He'd already started working in IT at the age of 6, and he's now building a wireless modern-day homestead powered by solar and wind power, and he's even growing his own vegetables and recently got some chickens. Those are some fun facts about Kevin that we learned this week as well. So please join me in welcoming Kevin to the stage.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. What could go wrong with Internet of Things and livestock? Not presenting on that today. Maybe that's another conversation for another day. So as Darlene mentioned, I'm the Chief IT Architect at the University of Rochester in upstate New York. And for folks that may know of higher ed structures, it's highly decentralized. Some corporate environments are also decentralized as well, but it tends to happen more often in a higher ed. So we're going to kind of talk through what we at the University of Rochester did. And as I go through this, I'm going to talk about some of the companies and products we've been working with. But just as a disclaimer, I'm not endorsing any products. These just happen to be, or companies, these just happen to be the tools that we kind of put together. I'm also going to talk through some of the processes. And wrong button. There we go. All right, so I want to start off with a quote. This was a big concept in our environment. By raise of hands, who knows who Grace Hopper is? So a small percentage of you. After this session, or sometime today or sometime this week, just do a quick Google search. Grace Hopper was fundamental in my IT learning. I never met the woman, and I never met anybody that knew her, but I studied a lot of the things that she did, and that's where my IT kind of started, was some of the futures of what she did in programming and in IT. This phrase that she used was fundamental not only in the work that she did, but it was also fundamental in the work that I brought to the University of Rochester. So how many folks have heard or a variant of, we've always done it this way, right? I would imagine the majority of you have. And in a decentralized environment, this was the biggest thing that I faced. I started at the university about 8 years ago. And the first thing when I got there was, well, why aren't you running more modern tools? Why aren't you running more modern processes? And a lot of the conversation was exactly this, is we've always done it this way. So I spent probably 6 or 7 years going through different roles at the university to get to where we are today. Part of that journey was, as I started with the Jira software, at the time it was Jira plus the Greenhopper product or add-on to do Agile, and trying to bring that concept to the university. Oops. All right, so I have tons of data, and I'm also going to try to do a live demo for you guys today. I've got it all prepped, and fingers crossed everything's going to go great. I have a backup just in case. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. I'll try to allow for some time for Q&A at the end as well. All right, so our use case. So this is kind of what I got thrown at. I got 500 plus professionals in our organization that provide support, and 100 plus support teams that are all decentralized. So I was given this use case by multiple people over the years of what they expected to see from IT. And starting with a single sentence use case like this is extremely difficult. We didn't even know what it really meant because we believed we had controls. We believed we had consistent processes. So in order to do this, I had many interviews across the organization with folks in leadership, folks that had the feet on the ground, running around from desk to desk, helping staff and students. Coming back to this use case of what do we really mean? And ultimately what I ended up doing as an architect at the university, I said, what else is out there? So we looked at different libraries, different foundations, different architectures that were out in industry. And ITIL was something that was continuing to grow. I used ITIL at prior companies in its early days. Part of the conversations when I was having those interviews, I'd go back and I'd show this diagram and say, is this what you're looking for? Are you looking for different modules of service delivery or service support? And so this became the foundation, essentially, of our conversation as we tried to bring a decentralized environment together. So, bit of an eye chart, but how do you translate an ITIL framework into an organization that doesn't care or want to understand ITIL? So myself and my information architect basically said, well, if we put it in a modular topology, which folks are used to looking at, what does it mean? So when we brought this to leadership, of course they said, well, there's too many boxes and too many lines I don't understand. Right? So what I eventually did over time is show that here's the things we want to focus on. And I got some champions in our leadership who said, okay, if we focus on our service catalog or our request fulfillment or our incident management, what else do we want to focus on beyond those things, but what are the things we want to push out to the future? So this very much became our roadmap document in adjacency to what is ITIL for the University of Rochester. You can see we put some products logos up there and names. I'm going to kind of walk through those more when I do the demo, but you can see Jira is the foundation and Confluence is the foundation of this topology of how we make all this work. These names come from ITIL and they come from ITSM standards, but it's layered on top of the software tools. Okay. Other tools that we use, we have Puppet in the environment. Riata's Insight is pivotal, which is why you kind of see it in multiple modules, and I'll kind of walk through some of that as well. So where did we start? So we started with multiple tools, multiple deployments of the same tool. You wouldn't be surprised of how many instances of Jira we had at the University of Rochester. Workflows, everybody wanted their own custom workflow. Practices and processes, it was everywhere. Spreadsheets. I was absolutely surprised when I started 8 years ago of how many people tracked their day-to-day work in a spreadsheet. I was absolutely astounded by just the number and the number of storage systems that they were also using. Shared mailboxes. So this is still a thing at the university that we're still trying to figure out where they all are. Is our help desk was in a shared mailbox, 20 some odd agents all working on that mailbox. And they had to come up with processes to say, hey, I've got this email or I've got this email and don't touch these. And it became a very complicated environment. Afterwards, we basically centralized on a tool set, on a foundation. We integrated multiple service desks, so we didn't have to say, hey, it's just IT in the system. We could take other people's spreadsheets, other people's shares and mailboxes that were not our IT conversations and bring them in. We simplified workflows and basically the transition of getting out of the mailbox, getting out of the document. Okay, so that's our journey to start with a use case. So I mentioned Service Catalog. So Service Catalog was the fundamental piece of our deployment. For those that don't know what a Service Catalog is, I pulled the definition here just to kind of give a concept of what it is. Internally, we talk about it's our people, process, and technologies. It's the things that we provide to the organization at multiple layers. So they start from a roll-up all the way down to the tools and technologies that support those services. So when we got started with this, we didn't know what it was going to look like. There wasn't a lot of material out there, and we started this probably about 6 years ago, what a service catalog would look like for a higher ed. So we have 260 some odd services within IT, but across the organization there's many, many more. So we asked our librarians that were actually on-premise, available to us as resources, and we went to them and we said, well, what would you do if you were building a service catalog? And they came up with this concept of concept, individuals, and relationships. And this is an ontology. And this is the document and the link there is what they gave us, hard copies to read through and understand what an ontology would mean to IT. So of course we have a bunch of technical managers, my architecture staff, some IT staff, all sitting and listening to librarian tell us this, and we're like, where do we start? What is a concept? What is an individual? What is a relationship? And later when I show our service catalog, I'll kind of highlight what those are. So who to engage with a service catalog? So we as IT thought we knew exactly what our services were. We were really good at saying, you know, we have Box and we have Zoom and we have SharePoint, we have all these great tools. But when we talk to our customers, They didn't call it SharePoint, they didn't call it Box, unless that's what they were told to call it. A lot of folks were saying we have documentation management, we have knowledge management, we have other services, human resource management. So instead of talking about PeopleSoft or Workday, they talked about what the function was as a service. So that was key in our conversations. We also talked to other stakeholders that were both IT and not IT, who were responsible and accountable for those services, what they heard people were saying that the services were called. And it was mixed all over the place. We had people calling things technology, we had people calling things our branded processes. We had a lot of non-normalization, essentially. We also talked to our providers, so our cloud providers, our IT providers. We talked to as many people that provided services not only to the university, but who were providing services to our customers at the university as well. And we listened to their language. And then ultimately we went to the end users, the folks that were calling the help desk, the folks that were emailing the help desk, the folks that were emailing individuals because they didn't know any other way to get help. And we talked to all those folks, or as many as we possibly could, and said, all right, we heard from customers, we heard from stakeholders, and we heard from providers. What do you have to say? So we had all this great information, we had to get organized. Getting organized was tricky until we started actually visually laying things out. So this is what our service catalog looks like from within the tool. It's a 4-tier hierarchy. And the way I kind of express it today is it's actually multiple catalogs. It's our accounts and passwords. It's administration and business services. And we broke these down into multiple catalogs. And when you drill into one of these, you get a mixture of processes and services that folks know, and also technology. So we can mix those together. And if you know it as Active Directory, great. If you just know it as account management, that's fine too, it's there. So we did this kind of related services concept as well. All right, so we have this service catalog concept. Who's accountable for it? Well, right now, when we started, it was every line of business manager. It was every service director. It was every person that managed a service was accountable for their own catalogs. We wanted to centralize that and get that out of the decentralized conversation. So what we ended up doing is establishing governance. Governance was key for maintaining our service catalog. It's also very key for maintaining our platform. So why is governance important? It's basically breaking down the silos, and it's breaking down the conversations and opening the teams to have a more transparent conversation versus it's my service, it's my way of doing things. So in order to come up with a governance, we established a structure. This structure was not accepted initially. It was very much a, why do you have so many eyes on this? Why can't we just do what we want? So this went through a few iterations, and here's what we ended up with, is we needed sponsors. So we have our VP of IT as our main sponsor. But really, it can be any C-level or VP level individual that basically helps set the vision and strategy. Our governance council is made up of directors with at least one person that's an ex officio, so that can facilitate without having to worry about voting. And we've rotated that person. It started with myself. We rotated some other directors to basically set the stage of, let's get bias removed out of the conversation from the voting members by taking away their ability to vote, right? And we saw some different conversations as we went through that of like, when I wasn't voting, I had a lot of strong opinions. But then when I was voting, my strong opinions were heard. And we've done this for about a year now, and it's working very, very well. Initially, it was like, why do we have to always promote something to governance? The key fundamental group that made this work was a mixture of people that understood process and technology. So we formed an architecture and build team. Now, we didn't go out and hire these individuals. We already had them. We trained them and we grew them to be able to listen to our stakeholders and our service managers and our customers ultimately. So we use this structure for governance. Risks, I'm not going to read through them, but there's definitely risk of governance. The benefits is we were getting consensus. We were getting inclusion like we never were before. Costs. So I get asked quite a bit. So we went through this whole conversation of working with the librarians. We set this governance model up. What is the cost of doing this? It's people time. There's tools out there, but really it's people time. It's people sitting in meetings, listening to other people talk on their ideas and trying to promote their ideas. We probably spend more hours right now a week doing governance because we're constantly building in this platform. Once we kind of settle out, it'll lighten up and maybe it'll be a quarterly conversation. All right, cost savings. So being a higher ed, we're always looking at deep cost savings. Most IT organizations are always looking at cost savings, but we're looking for the deepest way to save with the highest value. So one of the things I really looked at early on was the licensing models within Confluence. So buying just Jira Service Desk, for example, versus buying other licenses within the Jira platform. Mixing the Jira applications, essentially, with Service Desk software and core to see if that alleviated some of the financials. Or do we just dive in and buy a site-wide license, right? So some of the challenges with the mixed mode versus the unlimited is with the mixed mode, we have to manage our license counts. We have to make sure our base license matches our add-ons, and that any other licenses that are lower than that never go above our base, because then that's going to change our licenses. So that was a hard conversation of, do we want to save that much more money by managing the licenses? And for the first 6 months, it was a challenge. Now that we're kind of leveled out, it's pretty clear at this point. We've got most of the organization system, and we don't have to use the unlimited license, which was key for us. Oops. Key. All right, so balancing the licenses. So we have Crowd to make all of our user management easy. We have Jira Software as our base. The reason we did this is we knew all of our teams were not providing services, they were providing support. But they wanted to use Agile, and they wanted to use basic task management. They didn't need to be a Service Desk agent. So we put majority of our licenses in the software. Service Desk, on the other hand, is we have lots of agents since we have lots of different groups at the university. But we wanted to minimize just to cover level 1 and level 2 help desk. Our level 3 is our subject matter experts. They're in the Jira software. And then we use Jira Core for things like access to Insight, where they don't need to use software. They're not integrating the Service Desk. They just needed to get access to our assets or our service catalog. So we're using that Jira Core license to save there as well. Customizations, this was key for us. So I've managed a Jira environment for a long time. We have a subject matter expert that has as well. And I don't know how many of you have seen it, where you run away with custom workflows, custom fields. The environment becomes unmanageable. So we focused on this quite a bit. And we went back to that I2A framework and said, okay, we can customize, but what is the architecture that the industry is starting to leverage say about this? So we transitioned that into what it means inside of Jira. We started with workflows. We basically said, well, why do we need to have a custom workflow for every service or every team? What do we want to do? So we established bases, essentially. And then we allowed small variants. And I started with this concept of an ABC model. So we have the base model, which is A, and then we did B and C. But we weren't going to go to D or E or anything else, as we didn't want unique workflows. And what we did is we asked people to try. We asked them to try a couple templates that we had before coming back and saying, hey, I need it customized. And we found a ton of success in this. I think today we only have 4 or 5 types of workflows that have that ABC concept. So we have our general service desk for non-IT, our ITSM, and then everything else that's either agile or task. Custom fields, this was huge because we migrated multiple Jira environments where there was 1,000 or more custom fields. And I asked people, what's the difference between delivery date and delivered on? And when I asked people that, they didn't know. They just said, I knew I wanted it named this in the beginning, and no one explained it to me that I could name it something else. So taxonomy was key for what we wanted to do with the custom fields, is talking about what we have in the system already and saying, can you use that? Okay. Custom screens, this was huge as well, as everybody wanted their own screen. We basically said, no, we're going to tie the fields to the workflow. So if you're an ITSM workflow, you're going to get ITSM fields. If you're a standard service desk that's not IT, you're going to get standard fields. And we asked them to try again. Contexts were huge. We were able to split drop-downs for one group versus another by Jira project within the contexts. And then the service desk display name was also key in the conversation. As we could say to HR, yeah, if you want delivery date, that's great, but we're going to call it delivered on in the system. Just train your team to know the difference. This phrase is multiple. I tried to find a source, but there are multiple people who have said this, including myself. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And this was conversation as we try to minimize the customizations. And I still use this with the technical team today. They'll come back and they'll say, hey, we can do this, and here's all the fun stuff we can do. And I said, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And we have a real conversation of why we should or shouldn't do something. And this is the other premise that I use with that, is focus on the many, not the individuals. This helps the teams be more open. This helps them be more collaborative because they're talking the same language, they're talking the same structures. All right, non-IT service desks. So when we got started in this, we were central IT. We were focusing on what we needed to do to replace our ticketing systems. While we were doing that, I was working in the background of saying, well, what do it mean to neuroscience? What does it mean to purchasing? What does it mean to HR? What does it mean to our advancement, which is our gift fundraising? What does this system mean to them? And as I went through that conversations with them, they all had the same pain points. They all had spreadsheets. They all had shared mailboxes. And I said, stop. I said, why are you doing this to yourselves? We can use the tool to essentially take the IT out of ITSM, or essentially enterprise service management. So we put these groups in there, and we asked them to use the common workflows that we came up with, the common templates that we came up with, and not a single one of these groups asked for customization. They are all using the templates we came up with. So transition a non-IT team into an IT system. So this was a challenge for folks that were using shared mailboxes. They were good at shared mailboxes. They didn't know how to use the system. The first couple attempts that we had failed. And we didn't understand that there's always an IT component, or maybe there isn't, but we need to ask anyways. And what we found is that each group that we talked to that we considered non-IT had somebody that knew IT. They were managing systems for the business, but they weren't really doing like server administration or application administration. So we said, what if we took those folks and gave them access to manage things like request types, permissions, and some of the capabilities in Service Desk? That led into a conversation as well as, do you have an IT team that you lean on? Right, so as we went to HR, they told us who the IT teams that they were leaning on. And we said, okay, they're already in the system in this way. So let's find a way for them to help you be successful in Service Desk. And then for the non-IT teams is providing support for them, is basically coming up with a model, essentially a shared support model of, okay, here's what you're responsible for, and here's what we're responsible for. Multiple applications. So I'm going to go into the architecture a little bit before I get into the demo. What we did is we ended up going with Jira Server for one main reason, is we wanted to do some things that weren't available in cloud. And this was about 2 years ago, and now as cloud's kind of maturing and some of these capabilities are moving in the cloud, we'll most likely go there. But we didn't want to build a big server farm. We're a medium-sized or large-sized research university, but what do we need to do to support our end users? So we went with a single server concept, and we stacked all the Atlassian software on a single server. And then we connected it to our Shibboleth environment, we connected it to the database, and we have a Jenkins process, which I'll talk about in a minute, that automates things. So Shibboleth, most universities use Shibboleth for their single sign-on. They're not using the OneLogins or the Oktas, mainly because of cost. Shibboleth is an open source single sign-on tool. It's also highly customized. So we were able to take some basic constructs with some open source software that was embedded inside of Jira and Confluence and connect it to Shibboleth. Saved us a great deal of money. Email proxy. So this was a unique requirement that if we had started with a Service Desk software earlier, it probably wouldn't have come up. But because so many people were using shared mailboxes, they separated desktop support from website support, from server support, and they had mailing aliases for all of those. So we went to those groups and we said, we only can have one email address. The first thing we heard back was, well, I have it branded everywhere. It's on my websites, it's on printables, it's on things that we hand to students that we'll never see again. So with each service desk, it only can talk to one mailbox. We talked to our email system providers, we talked to our experts around email. And then we got a hold of ISOS Technology and said, we have this use case. What can you do for us? They had this great technology for email processing. It takes multiple aliases and puts it into one mailbox. And on your tickets, you can see what the original to address was. So we know it went to web support. We can drop it in the queues for web support. That was great. Also, unknown user mapping. So we didn't want to turn on our service desk environment to create local users every time we didn't know who they were. Be hard to manage, continuously grow. It allows us to take the users that are not in our service desk and map them to an unknown user, which is great. Click to clone is another ISOS technology that saves us tons of labor. So we're not in the cloud, right? So patching, upgrading, maintaining, rebuilding our dev environments is a little bit of a challenge. This software essentially takes a backup from prod on a regular basis, and we can rebuild our non-prod environments with a click of a button, and it's using Jenkins to do this. Along with this, we've already started doing our upgrades through this process. So we can upgrade our dev environment and roll it back to a previous prod environment if we had to do some bug fixing. It allows us to be a little bit more agile and nimble with the software versus having to rebuild from scratch. We have also some job scheduling and execution in there as well to clean up some log files or clean up some system level stuff. All right, demos. I'm going to attempt the thing that you should never attempt in a presentation. It is a live demo. And let's see if this will work. All right, so I am logged in as one of our customers. And we have all of our service desks, okay? I'm gonna start with our HR desk. So this is really neat that our HR group came into this. Our HR group is 4 different departments that are not in the same location. They are highly decentralized, just like IT. They are all now working in the same service desk, and we're about to put them in production. So we have things like our IT systems, so the IT group within our HR group that is not really IT, they just know how to do some IT capabilities. We have all of our payroll, our business process around HR. We have our online learning. That was interesting in this group, is our online learning is separate from all the rest of our HR departments. But say, for example, I have a problem with an HR website, right? I can't log in. I'm going to create this. So they have an HR website on here. Guess who manages the HR website? Not the IT team, or not the HR team, it's the IT team. IT is in a different service desk. So we came up with a way to basically allow the agents to hand off a ticket from one service desk to another. So here I am. I'm in my HR, am I in my HR desk? This is why you don't do live demos. Let me switch over to our HR desk. Few more projects. Human resources. I was in the IT support for HR. So I have this ticket that came in, can't log in. When I open this up, it's open to all the HR groups that are in here. But maybe they don't want to show something because there's something sensitive. Within the service desk, we allow this capability to hand off to the support team. And this is where we're using the data that we put in the Riata insight to basically pull our support teams and use it in our transitions. So maybe I want to get this over to HRMS system support. And when I do this, it's going to change the security of the ticket because all those groups are in the service desk. And I just secured this ticket to this group. Say I need to bring in another group, I can come back and I can pick a different group. Maybe it's something on the desktop that's causing problems. I can do this as well and bring it into that group. It's going to change the security on this. So with HR data, as many of you know, it's sensitive data. We don't want to have that private data go to anybody that's working tickets. So we're using these security models within a service desk and this ability to hand off through those security models in real time without having to ask people to go and change the field. We're using workflow. We're using the wizards and the forms to say, hey, just choose who you want to give it to. What if it's really a core IT thing, right? So if I go back to that customer view, maybe. So if I go back to that customer view and I look at my requests, I have an HR ticket. What I'm about to do is what our end users asked us to do, and we had to find a way to do it, is I'm going to move this to a different service desk. I'm going to basically hand it off to not HR, but university IT level 1 support. And when I do this, it's going to go over to the university IT service desk, and it's going to create a relationship. So back to that service catalog conversation. It's going to create a relationship. And notice now I have an IT ticket that is blocking this HR ticket. If I go back to the customer view, and this was the key for our organization, and I refresh this screen, I only see one ticket from the customer view. I don't see 2 service desks. The customer that started in HR doesn't need to know that IT is fixing the problem. They don't have to go to another service desk or another layer to open a ticket. We can do a handoff, and they see everything from the one ticket. This was paramount for our organization. If I go back into the agent view here and I go over to that IT service desk, I can see level 1 has the ticket, and I can see it's been transferred from HR. So they know it did not come in. They can see the relationship back. Now say level 1 can't do anything about this. It's something going on with the code of the website. We built that same handoff capability inside of our ITSM workflows. And say I need to get it to level 2 support. I can easily do that. But I don't want it to go to level 2. I want it to go to the HR support. This is where I have to change the service on the catalog. It came in as an other request because we don't know how to categorize it, at least at this point. As we mature our service catalog, we'll be able to. When I come in here and I change this to our administration and business processes, I can now pick our IT human resource team. So this will update the service, and now I have information that went from one service to another. It gives us an idea of how things are changing in our environment. Now when I come back, I have lots more support teams. This was also paramount in our deployment. We were misrouting tickets on a regular basis in other tools. We were misassigning them, which means we're delaying support for folks. This concept of support team by service has reduced our misalignments by almost 80%. And getting the tickets into the right teams. So I'll pick the HRMS team in IT and hand it off. And what you'll see is I'm at 2 service desks right now. The customer can only see the one. When I did this, it created another ticket that has a relationship. And when I go into this one, I'm still in service desk, but I'm actually looking at a Jira software project. So I can use my agile flows. I can use my task management flows. I don't need to use a service desk flow. And what we did is between these relationships and these concepts of the service catalog is build a map of how we get tickets through our system to get it to the right people that can do the right support. Now, interestingly enough, at this level, I can hand it back up to different teams, including our level 1 and level 2 support. Maybe they didn't give us enough information. I can send it back and ask for more information. Or I can complete the ticket and close it. So that was paramount with our ability to hand off from service desks to other Jira projects. It also helped with maintaining our licenses. So the integrated support teams, as you saw, was basically, it's a multi-team. We went from this concept to, hey, assign it to Sally, assign it to John, assign it to this person. We said, stop. Just because we're single-threaded in that environment doesn't mean we have to be. Create a support team, put in one individual in there for now. We started growing virtual teams when we started seeing that support teams only had one member. It gave us a quick look of, okay, here's where we are single-threaded, and we can use the tool to report on that. All right, so I'm gonna dive into what I call the brains of our platform. And it's basically a bunch of metadata and data about our environment. So we have things like our configuration management database that has assets. We have our customer database which has all our individuals that we know about. We have reference data, which is our support teams. So when I look at our support teams, I have people on there. I have our services on there. This is how we're making those decisions in service desk of how to get the ticket to the right people. And oh, by the way, we need to know what your support team's email address, and don't give me an individual. Give me a distribution list. And when we went through this, we found about 30% of our support teams didn't have distribution lists. We cleaned those up because we said we weren't going to put them in the system unless they had a certain distribution list. This made it paramount for our organization to work as a single service delivery environment and get the tickets into the right platforms. For the service catalog, I can now go from the support team into the service. So let's look at application development. I now have a different view. Okay, I know all the support teams now that are supporting application development. In a decentralized environment, we don't have one application group. There's many application groups. I now know them all. And I included my desktop support for our application development and deployment. There's other teams in here as well. I know what Jira projects are responsible for this. That helps with the routing piece. So automatic routing based on this data is now possible. So I showed you a manual routing capability. Now I'm going to show you that we can use this data, and when I come back and open another type of ticket that has some intelligence, our Oasis group is part of our advancement group. I'm just going to quickly go through this. That's optional. Oops. That's optional. We don't need level 1 or level 2 support to actually do anything with this request. It can go right to that level 3 team. So with all that metadata and data that's in the system, using it in Service Desk allowed us to basically take this ticket that is an IT ticket, and now remember, if I go look at my request, I only see those 2 tickets. Come back over to the agent view. And when I look in that queue for the tickets that came in, I don't see that Oasis ticket. If I go to my level 3 team queue, I see it in here. And when I open this ticket, it automatically went to our Oasis group. Our level 1, level 2 team had nothing to do with this ticket when it came into the system. It now changed the customer support layer on our or our help desk to focus on phone calls and triaging the unknown requests. We can do this auto routing. We started doing this with finance. We started doing this with our telecom services, as our level 1, level 2s weren't prepared to handle those. All right. Since the demo's going so good, I'm going to keep going. See if we can maybe break it here. All right, so I want to spend some time in this data and kind of show you some powerful things that we started doing. And we started using this from a reporting perspective as well. So we started loading our assets in here, and we said, okay, what if we took our assets and organized them by our facilities and our rooms and our data centers and our closets across the organization? I can come into our primary data center and get a quick look of all the assets by count that are in that location. I don't have to generate a report for someone to quickly say, I have 1 optical node card in our data center. Okay? If I go to another location that is not a data center, but it's one of our closets for different things, I have 2 servers in there. Why do I have 2 servers in a closet, right, that is providing something? This happens to be most likely our Active Directories that we distribute across our buildings and organizations, so not just in our data center. But I can quickly get to that information by just traversing by facility and room. And oh, by the way, if I want to see from a room view, I can go into the room and get its view. And we started putting pictures of what's in those rooms. So as the techs are out there, they know what to expect next time they go back. What should it look like when they last left it is kind of what we're doing with this. We haven't done it yet, but we plan on tying all these assets to our services. That's going to be huge for us. One of our individuals at the organization calls it the magic decoder ring. If a server goes down, how do I know what's on that server? We'll know all the services, all the support teams, and all the related information about that service once we tie those pieces together. Another conversation we had is, what if an individual leaves the organization? How do we know that when they leave, we have to update something? So our customer database became key. And I'm going to pick on somebody that recently left because I can. If I can spell her name right. So Lisa and I worked together on quite a bit of things. She was a great individual in our finance space and worked on our IT systems related to finance and many other areas. But when she left the organization, that quick information, that inbound references was key to say, hey, we missed something. And unfortunately, it's not in the system anymore because we fixed it. But there was a customer related to Lisa. It was her person that worked for her. It was a contractor. They weren't in our HRMS system. It was a contractor that got left aside and wasn't realigned with a new manager. We quickly found that in the system. And oh, by the way, there's 7 data collections, 1 data integration, and 7 support teams that aren't realigned with the new manager yet. We can now use this data that says when someone leaves, we can do offboarding, and here's everything related to them. So that's key in our environment. Service catalog, so I want to show you some more of that. So our service catalog is a 4-tier hierarchy. As I mentioned, we have some roll-up catalogs, our services within them. Me as an architect, I needed an app catalog. I needed something that basically said, where's all my applications? And I need to know if they're technology or their processes or their people applications. So we went 2 layers down and brought all of our technologies in and all of our concepts. This fulfilled the need in the organization that we never were able to do before, is if I shut down a tool, what services are impacted? And that was key in this type of setup. All right, so I'm coming up on my time. For questions, feel free to reach out to me through the app. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to get on phone calls and talk through things over email or anything. We've done a lot in this environment. We have a lot more to go. So thank you all for attending today.